Montez Sweat then got traded to the Chicago Bears, but it was a really interesting press conference.
Yeah, to say the least.
So we actually have a clip of that press conference that we think that you guys would all enjoy hearing, because let's just say it's not something, if you're a Chicago Bears fan, that maybe makes you feel more comfortable with the new situation. Take a listen.
Be a different situation if it was a trade and then sign. That would be, in a sense, I feel like something that I would feel more so than just an initial trade. But I know the opportunity is there, and somebody has to get paid. I know that.
So if he does get an extension, before that not sit right with you?
No, it wouldn't, for sure.
So to give context of that real quickly, so that was Jaylon Johnson, their star cornerback,
who also requested a trade, who he wanted out of Chicago before the deadline. So
yeah,
correct. And so he wanted out because he also was trying to work out a contract extension. He doesn't get the extension. Montez Sweat gets traded. And then the conversation being, well, wait a minute. And of course you probably know the answer, right? Like, we understand that a player is going to want to get paid first.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't say that out loud. Jaylon Johnson did not mince words.
Less than 24 hours after the guy got there. I mean, it wasn't like this is weeks later and they're like, yeah, we've talked. I mean, Montez Sweat is barely in the building, and already Jaylon Johnson's like, yeah, welcome, but I better get paid first. And and then he was, we talked about it before, did not mince words. He was very straight about it. He was like, yeah, it would not sit well with me if he got paid first.
Yeah, this whole thing with the Bears trade is kind of puzzling to me. And actually, Michael Lombardi was on the Pat McAfee show, kind of talking about this too, and talking about how stupid of a deal this was. And that's as much as I'm going to preface this by, because I feel like I'm going to ruin everything that he has to say. Just take a listen to Michael Lombardi on the Pat McAfee show.
And get a deal done beforehand, kind of an early start on free agency. Do you see that ever happening before?
No.
And is that not what the
okay. That's hogwash. That's completely bull. Okay. That's completely ridiculous. Like, first of all, you're giving up a tremendous asset, right? You're giving up a high second-round pick. Here's what people have to understand. In every draft, I don't care what Mel says. I don't care what Jeremiah says. I don't care what every draftnik going back to Jerry Jones and the drugstore list. I don't care. There's always between 10 and 15 guys that you say in a draft, these guys are starters from day one. That's a first-round pick. Forget about I took him in the first round. You have to define the player. This guy is a starter, and he comes in and starts. And once you get past 10 or 15, depending on the draft, everybody.
And so anyways, listening to that, obviously it was clear that Michael Lombardi didn't mince words as far as, the football IQ or whatever you want to call it when it comes to this trade. And you got to ask yourself, fellas, with as poorly as the Bears are doing, it didn't seem to necessarily make any sense at all to really kind of get a rental on this guy. I mean, and Lombardi made a point that there's just like no way in hell the Montez Sweat's really going to get another deal done here. I mean, you guys agree with that, or what do you think is up the Bears' sleeve here?
I think they tried to do what the Ravens did last year with Roquan. They tried to, instead of going out and bidding for him in free agency, let's get him now, and then we can give up an asset with the understanding that this gets us out of a bidding war. The only difference is the Ravens were in it last year. The Ravens were a threat to win it all. And even if Roquan doesn't re-sign, it's okay. You went for it. If Montez Sweat doesn't re-sign, it's not like the Bears are going for something this year. It would just be a waste of a second-round pick that you just traded away. And not even to mention, in his opening press conference, Montez Sweat pretty openly said he's not focused on signing a long-term deal with the Bears at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's not unsurprising for someone to say, but the other part of it for the Bears, we just talked about it, Zach, of them spending draft capital. They just did this last year with Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool, they acquired for a second-round pick, and they shipped him out again. So you're looking at your investments. So if you're not going to hold on to a guy, that's one thing. You're going to make a run, and you're going to take a chance.
DJ Moore.
Sorry?
And the DJ Moore trade.
Yeah, well, and you have all this draft capital, but in this case why are you using the draft capital to get really high-end talent, and pass rushers are hard to come by, especially elite pass rushers? Why trade for one and not have the expectation that you want to keep him in Chicago? Because all of a sudden you're looking at the last couple moves that the Chicago Bears have made if you're going this route. Chase Claypool, again, that was probably going down as one of the worst trade deadline moves that we've seen in recent memory. But on the other side of it right now, Sweat, you're trying to rebuild the team. That's a building block you can use moving forward. They have the cap space. But the problem is it's not Montez Sweat's job to focus on his contract. But for Chicago, you cannot let him walk out the door.
No.
That's just it, right? Like, I mean, you've now made the move, and now you hope that you can sign a big deal contract with him. I just don't know if Sweat's going to want to stick around. And like, it's just an awfully risky move, and to hope that you get a rental in hopes that you can sign him again. Because, and I would understand if, Montez Sweat gets there and they're on the up and up, right? Like that they're actually starting to move to a certain direction, like, right? If they have the momentum, and that somebody like Montez Sweat can see that there is like an actual plan.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, there isn't one. And that's the real big problem. And to your point, Zach, talking about how the Ravens, they actually had a plan. They had a momentum going into, they were a playoff team, whereas the Bears aren't anywhere near close to that.
I think you also have to take into effect the going with another big trade was Chase Young went for a third. So you see Montez Sweat go for a second round pick, and you're thinking, okay, that's the price tag. To get one of these top pass rushers, you have to give up a second round pick. And then all of a sudden you see a guy from the same team who arguably, yes, the injuries are a concern and everything, is more talented, go for less. So it just added more. I saw there was a lot of chatter on Bears Twitter, and they were just like, I would have much rather given up a third for Chase Young than a second for Sweat. And you do start to ask yourself those questions. It would have been riskier with the injuries, but if you're only giving up a third, wouldn't you rather take the chance of re-signing Chase Young than you've now given up a second, and it does not necessarily look like Montez Sweat wants to be in a Bears uniform. No,
and it's a big deal, right? I mean, look at the Ravens and how they actually handled the draft. And I think, obviously, would you give up a second round for Roquan? I think we'd do that 1,000 times over. But ultimately, a lot of the Ravens' success has come from the draft. I mean, you think about a lot of the star players are on that team right now, and they have absolutely come from the draft. It's interesting to say the least. Ryan, how you doing on the clip there?
We're doing good here in a second. Sorry, I was trying to put something together, and we're going to get into it in a second. But last thing I wanted to say about this whole topic, at some point, you're going to have to build around your young talent. You're going to have to try to have a vision. And the Bears, even though it's been a really chaotic, and obviously they do not have the system in place to figure out what they want to do next. However, they do have a lot of draft picks, and now you do have some really young pieces. You got to figure out what you're going to have in Justin Fields and how you want to handle that moving forward, right? But you have DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, Jaylon Johnson's a really talented corner, and you have pieces there that you can build around. But at what point does it become to move past the rebuild, you got to be able to have these foundational pieces. And look, I don't blame Montez Sweat if he says, hey, I don't believe what you're doing. But for the Bears, it's a huge disappointment if you make this move and he does not stay, because then at the end of the day, what's the point of it? Yeah, Chase Young went for a cheaper pick going for a third-round pick, but at least the San Francisco 49ers are going to be in the hunt to win a Super Bowl. Chicago's just trying to get back into the playoff discussion.